The storm had passed, but the smell of scorched alloy and blood still hung in the air. Sergeant Darius Cole sat on the edge of a makeshift cot, shirt off, bandages wrapped tight around his side where plasma fire had seared through armor and skin alike. The field hospital hummed with the low sounds of medtechs working and soldiers murmuring. He ignored it all. His eyes were fixed on the far wall, unblinking. She was gone. They'd pulled Varelli from the battlefield the moment the evac ships punched through the atmosphere. Celidari protocols, strict and immediate. Pacifist species didn't linger near human soldiers if they could help it. Not that she had a choice in the matter. She was barely conscious when they lifted her into the med pod. He hadn't even gotten a word out before she disappeared behind sterilized doors. Darius clenched his jaw and let the pain in his ribs remind him he was still alive. He'd lost Private Thorne in that ambush, blown apart covering the retreat. He'd lost Sergeant Kane to a nerve gas shell 10 minutes later. But he hadn't lost her. Varelli had frozen when the Koth marauders breached the flank, standing there like a beacon in her white medical robes as bullets split the ground around her. Darius hadn't thought. He'd just moved, dropped 2 hostiles with clean shots, dragged her into cover, and kept firing. He didn't even know why he'd done it. Instinct, maybe. Or something uglier, guilt. Guilt that humans were always the monsters in the room. A hiss of hydraulics pulled him from his thoughts. Commander Rajic stepped into the medical bay, ducking to clear the doorway. His polished uniform looked freshly pressed, his metals catching the overhead light like teeth. "Cole," he said, flat and official. "Debrief in 20. Darius didn't move. "If it's another medal, I don't want it." Rajic frowned. "It's not a medal. It's a warning." That got Darius's attention. He stood, wincing. "Warning me for what?" "Saving someone. For compromising a tactical position to do it," Rajic said. "You left Kane's team unsupported. We lost ground. And men. We saved a civilian. She was a Celidari medic. Not mission critical. She's a person." Rajic's eyes flicked down to the fresh bandages. "She's gone, Cole. Already off-world. Her people pulled her the moment the evac dust settled. Whatever you think happened, it's over." Darius watched him go, the door whispering shut behind him. He sat back down, slower this time. The ache in his ribs deepened with every breath, but it wasn't the pain that kept his chest tight. It was the absence. She'd looked at him differently. Back there, after the ambush, once the adrenaline ebbed and they were both breathing hard in the dirt. Not with fear. Not like the other Celidari, who flinched every time a human raised their voice. No, Varelli had looked at him with something closer to wonder. And something he didn't want to name. He hadn't expected gratitude. He definitely hadn't expected her hand on his, trembling and warm, whispering, "Why would you risk your life for me?" He hadn't answered then. And now he'd missed the chance. The next day, he limped into the barracks, slower than usual, hoping to lose himself in routine. The others were still in recovery or redeployed. The place felt hollow, echoing with memories of voices that wouldn't return. He tossed his gear onto the bunk and lowered himself down, letting the silence settle. He should have felt relieved. No more questions, no more blame. But the quiet didn't bring peace. It brought ghosts. He reached into the footlocker, pulled out a small, charred medallion, Celidari metal, braided in that strange infinity weave they favored. She dropped it during the retreat. He didn't even know if it was valuable. He just hadn't wanted to leave it behind. The door slid open. He turned, expecting another officer, maybe a courier. Instead, he froze. Varelli stood there, robes traded for an Alliance uniform. Slim. Angular armor wrapped around her in sleek matte silver. Her skin, that soft lavender hue unique to her kind, seemed paler than before. But her eyes, those iridescent, opal-colored eyes, held the same intensity he remembered. Maybe more. Behind her stood 2 coalition officials, both watching Darius like he was a question they weren't sure they wanted answered. Varelli stepped forward. "Permission to enter?" Darius blinked. "You're not supposed to be here." "I requested reassignment," she said. "And I received approval." He frowned. "To where?" She raised her chin slightly. To your unit. The pause hung heavy between them. My people think I'm broken, she said quietly. They said I should be debriefed, counseled, healed. But all I could think was, I watched someone throw himself into fire for me. And I did nothing. Darius started to protest, but she cut him off. I'm not here because I want revenge. I'm not even here because I want to fight. Her voice softened. I'm here because someone showed me that there are things worth protecting. And that protection isn't weakness. He swallowed hard. You're not a soldier. I'm not, she agreed. But I will be. Darius glanced past her to the two officials. One gave a slight nod. This was real. Approved.
Done.
He looked back at her. She held his gaze. Unshaken. Determined. He should have said no. Should have told her she didn't belong here. That this place would chew her up and leave nothing behind but armor and blood. Instead, he said, You ever fired a rifle? She smiled just a little. Not yet. And just like that, the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first shot Varelli fired didn't hit anything. Not even close. The rifle kicked harder than she expected, the shot veering wide and sparking harmlessly against the rusted hull of a derelict skiff. She lowered the weapon, ears ringing slightly inside her helmet, breath shallow. Across the clearing, Darius didn't say a word. He just watched her. They were alone on a controlled training range set deep inside Outpost Theta, the assignment hub for fringe units, dangerous deployments, minimal oversight. The perfect place to hide a pacifist with something to prove. Varelli adjusted her stance and tried again. This time the bolt struck the target, barely. It skimmed the edge of the silhouette and scorched a line down its left shoulder. She exhaled, almost apologetically. I thought I'd feel something. Darius finally moved, trudging across the dirt with a slow, deliberate gait. You will, he said, after your 10th time. Or your first miss when it matters. She looked down at the rifle. It's heavier than I imagined. Everything is, he said. Once you're holding it for the right reasons. She studied his face. There were fresh lines there since the battlefield, subtle, worn into the edges of his mouth and the corners of his eyes. He looked tired, but not defeated. Grounded. Like stone. I didn't come here to be you, she said. I know. I'm not trying to become a killer. Darius stopped in front of her, arms crossed. Good. Because if you ever get comfortable pulling that trigger, I'll personally drag you off this base. It should have been harsh, but it wasn't. It was a promise. One she understood too well. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her quarters were spare, bare cot, a locker, and a single data slate containing coalition manuals she already had memorized. Varelli sat cross-legged on the floor, replaying the battle in her mind. The moment she'd frozen. The way Darius had moved, instinctive, precise, terrifying. She hadn't felt helpless, exactly. She'd felt irrelevant. That was the part she couldn't shake. She touched the small necklace around her neck, thin silver cords twisted around a single blue shard of homeworld crystal. A symbol of healing. She still believed in it. She had to. But she couldn't unsee what Darius had done, what he'd had to do. She remembered the way his hands trembled afterward, not from adrenaline, but from restraint. He could have wiped out more of the enemy. He didn't. He did only what was needed to keep her alive. The next morning, she beat him to the range. This time, she hit center mass. Darius grunted approval. You're not here to shoot straight, though. No. You're here to survive. And to make sure others do too. A week passed. Then 2. She trained relentlessly, small arms, field strategy, threat assessment. Her people believed in spiritual harmony. The coalition believed in squad cohesion. But humans? Humans believed in adaptation. And under their brutal, sometimes uncaring training regimens, Varelli found herself changing. She didn't lose her empathy. She just stopped letting it paralyze her. She learned how to move through the battlefield like a ghost. Fast. Quiet. Useful. In their 3rd exercise together, she pulled a wounded trooper out of a collapsing bunker while laying suppressive fire one-handed. When the sim ended, she was shaking, her pulse hammering against the inside of her skull. But she had done it. Later, Darius handed her a canteen and said, "That was the most human thing I've ever seen." She took a long sip before answering. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" "Both." He didn't say more. He never said more than necessary. But she was beginning to understand the meaning behind his silences. And then came the deployment order. A small listening post on the planet Sindir had gone dark. High probability of Koth insurgent activity. Coalition brass wanted a recon and secure op low priority on the surface until you looked at what was stored inside. Tactical encryption cores. Sensitive files. Personnel. They deployed as a 5-soldier unit. Darius leading, Varelli embedded, now technically a field medic with combat clearance. She wore her armor without complaint. She packed her rifle without hesitation. But as the dropship descended through the ash-choked atmosphere of Sindir, her hands trembled for the first time in days. Darius noticed. He leaned closer, voice low. "You're not here to be fearless. You're here to be brave anyway." She nodded. They hit the ground under cover of a dust storm. Visibility was low. The air stank of old war, burnt copper, recycled ozone, stale fear. The listening post was half buried under rubble, the entrance torn open by explosive charges. The Koth were here. Darius signaled silently, splitting the squad. 2 flanked wide while he and Varelli moved through the main corridor. Her boots crunched over broken glass and shattered datapads. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the emergency lights pulsing down the hall. Red, red, red. The first firefight came fast. 2 Koth insurgents burst from a side door, shouting guttural war cries. Darius dropped one instantly. The second ducked into cover, returning fire. Varelli pressed herself against the wall, adrenaline surging. She counted the timing of the enemy's shots, closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, and stepped out. She didn't aim for the chest. She aimed for the weapon. The shot struck the rifle's receiver, sparking metal and sending the Koth spinning back. Darius rushed forward, booted the stunned insurgent into unconsciousness. When he turned to her, something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "You chose to disable him," he said. "Yes." He looked at the still-smoking rifle on the ground. "That takes more control than most soldiers ever learn." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. They moved on. By the end of the mission, the data was secure, the hostiles were either captured or dead, and every coalition operative accounted for. Back on the ship, Darius sat across from her, cleaning his rifle. "You did good," he said simply. Varelli stared out the viewport, the burned surface of Sindir shrinking beneath them. "It doesn't feel like good. Because you still care." She turned to him. "And you?" He paused, then said, "I care that you made it back." She looked down at her hands, still trembling, but steady enough to reload a rifle, to carry a comrade, to choose mercy over death. "Next time," she said quietly, "I want to lead." He smiled, barely, but it was there. "Then I'll follow." The desert moon of Tellar 5 wasn't supposed to be a battleground. It was a diplomatic waypoint, neutral ground where Celadari healers and coalition liaisons met twice a cycle. But neutrality meant nothing to the Koth. They struck during a summit, fast and ruthless, detonating plasma charges and breaching the meeting hall before the planetary defense grid even activated. By the time the emergency beacon reached the closest garrison, Darius and Varelli were already in orbit, redirected from leave without warning. Their ship touched down amid fire and chaos. Diplomats dead, buildings ablaze, civilians screaming. Varelli didn't hesitate. She sprinted into the wreckage without waiting for orders, a medpack slung across one shoulder and her rifle in hand. Darius followed, but he wasn't leading this time. Not officially. Not emotionally. This was her battlefield now. She found the wounded quickly. Celadari mostly, dazed and bleeding, clustered behind a collapsed marble column. A young male clutched a shattered leg, whimpering through clenched teeth. Varelli dropped beside him, injected a stabilizer, and applied a pressure seal, while keeping her rifle within reach. "You're safe," she told him, voice steady. Stay down and breathe. From behind, Darius fired twice, clean, controlled shots. A Koth scout fell to the ground, writhing. Another fled into the smoke. We're surrounded, he said. Minimal cover. They're not retreating. She met his eyes. Then we hold. They barricaded the survivors into the shattered atrium of the old embassy, stacking marble slabs and overturned tables to form a crude perimeter. The Koth circled like wolves, unseen but close, testing the edges, firing sporadically, waiting for fear to rip the defenders apart. But there was no fear in Vareli's voice when she gave orders. Cole, suppress fire on the south corridor. Millar, cover the north flank. Alther, keep pressure on that wound and conserve your oxygen. Her hands moved like a surgeon's, her words like a commander's. Darius obeyed, without question. She was calm under fire in a way he'd only seen once before, from veterans with years of blood behind them. But her calm wasn't jaded. It was earned. It was purpose, not habit. The Koth breached an hour later. Explosives tore a hole in the western wall, sending debris flying. Screams echoed. Dust clouded everything. Vareli moved like lightning. 1 second, she was beside a wounded Celadari. The next, she was on her feet, rifle braced against her shoulder, cutting down the first attacker with 3 sharp bursts. Darius slammed into cover beside her, breath ragged. They're pushing hard. We push harder, she said. He almost laughed. Almost. The fighting dragged into night. They lost one. Millar, shot through the throat, while shielding a diplomat. But they held the line. Vareli never left a fallen body unrecovered. Never missed a command. When the evac shuttles finally arrived at dawn, they found her still standing in the rubble, armor scorched, face streaked with ash, eyes wide and unflinching. After the medics took the wounded, after the Koth were routed and Coalition Marines secured the perimeter, Darius pulled her aside. You're not a medic anymore. She looked up at him, exhaustion clinging to her features. Then what am I? He searched her face for something, doubt, grief, hesitation. He found none. You're what they needed, he said. She nodded, but the moment held weight. I didn't want this. I know, but I chose it. Every time. He rested a hand on her shoulder. Then you did it right. They stood in silence for a while, the burning skyline casting shadows long and jagged. Later, back at the outpost, Command sent an official commendation. Not for Darius. For her. Field initiative. Tactical resilience. Civilian preservation under siege. She didn't smile when she read it. Instead, she walked into the comms room and dialed a secure Celadari line. When her elder answered, Vareli simply said, I didn't abandon our ways. I defended them. And I'd do it again. No answer came, but none was needed. A week later, the base was quiet. Repairs were underway. Troop rotations had slowed. Darius sat on a bench near the landing pads, watching a shuttle rise into the upper atmosphere. Vareli approached, her armor freshly cleaned, helmet clipped to her belt. They want to transfer me, she said. He looked up. To where? A coalition peacekeeping initiative. Mixed race units. Less combat, more stabilization. Med-heavy ops. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds like something you design. I did. A pause. You leaving? He asked. She hesitated, then sat beside him. Only if you come too. He blinked. You're recruiting me? I'm forming a new team. And I need someone who knows how to survive everything. He stared straight ahead. You don't need me anymore. She shook her head. I didn't ask because I need you. I asked because I trust you. The words landed harder than any bullet. He turned to her slowly, and for the first time in months, the weight behind his eyes lifted just a little. You've changed. So have you. He nodded once. All right. I'm in. She stood, offered her hand. He took it without hesitation. Together, they walked toward the waiting shuttle, side by side, not protector and protected, not soldier and medic, but something stronger. Partners.